Greetings and welcome to Bring It On. My name is Bob Hayes and I'm going to be a host for today's show. And as we've told you in past shows, we're trying to bring to the community some information that is a good source to try and answer some of the questions. And again, this week we're going to be talking about the student success budget. It seems to be the hot topic, so we're going to be talking about it. I also would like to disclose to you, I'm not only a show host, but I'm currently the chairman of the board of the school committee. So, having said that, I have three guests with me today that are two from the school district principals. We have the middle school principal, Bill Tranter from Hanson Middle School. Bill, thank you for coming.
Thanks, Bob.
We have Dr. Ruth Gilbert-Whitner. She is the superintendent of schools from the district. Ruth, thank you.
Great to be here, Bob. Thank you.
And we also have George Ferro. He's the principal at the Hanson Middle School. And we're going to, the Whitman Middle School, I'm sorry. And we're going to try to give you a perspective today of what the principals from these schools think of the student success budget. So, George, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Great. So, student success budget obviously is going to affect everyone in both towns, whether it be financially, whether it be educationally for student success, and obviously that's why that name was brought out. So, George, how do you think it's going to affect a middle schooler from Whitman?
Well, I think if you're a student who's entering the school next year and we were successful, and if this budget is successful, students will be able to have more related arts than they would currently now have. So we would have now, with the addition of a second Spanish teacher at the middle school, students would be able to have a class called Introduction to the Spanish Culture in grade 6, which we currently do not offer. And then we'd be able to double the amount of students who are able to take Spanish 1 Part A in grade 7 and Spanish 2 Part B in grade 8. So they're going to be exposed to different cultures and then well on their way to earning their first year of Spanish upon leaving middle school instead of having just to start it in high school.
How are you doing it now?
What takes place now is we have one Spanish teacher at both of our middle schools, and they do a great job. And what happens is that we can only offer it to approximately 60 students in grade 7 and 60 students in grade 8. With the addition of a second person, we would now be able to offer the related art or an introductory Spanish class to Spanish culture in grade 6. And then we would also be able to double, so enough 120 students in grade 7 and up to 120 students in grade 8 would be able to complete Spanish 1 and then be able to take Spanish 2 in high school.
Great. So currently, basically in layman's term, for the average person to understand, just sharing a teacher with Hanson Middle.
We were in the past. We currently now have one each, and this would allow us to have 2 each, or to double what we currently have. And I also want to be clear that not every student will still be able to get Spanish 1 completed in middle school, because we would need an additional 4 Spanish teachers in order for that to happen. So it could become a full academic class like math, science, English, and social studies. But this will at least put us on the path to offer it to up to a little over 50% to 60% of each grade level in 7th and 8th.
So the 2 is not really going to cure the problem, but it's on its way to curing the problem. Is that what you're telling me?
That's an absolutely good analogy.
Bill?
With Spanish, we're similar to George. However, all of our 6th graders currently take Spanish 1 day a week. All of our 8th graders, I take that back, some of our 8th graders have it as Part 1 of Spanish 1, but it's 3 days a week. And our 7th graders, we have probably about 60 students who have part of it, Spanish, 3 days a week. This would allow us to have all of 6th grade, all of 7th grade, at least have an exposure to Spanish, but then we'd also be able to increase the number of students who are able to take Part 1 of Spanish in 7th and 8th grade, so we'd be able to maximize the number of students who'd be able to partake in the foreign language.
Ruth, this is a question for you. A lot of people might think that foreign languages aren't important in a middle school. Can you kind of explain that?
Well, the instruction of a foreign language probably should actually begin in elementary school if we really want our students to attain fluency. However, we know that the world our students are growing up into when they graduate from high school, go on to either career or higher education, is becoming much more diverse, and as a result, facility with a language in addition to English is going to give them a much more competitive edge as they look for jobs in the future. Certainly, we've seen in our lifetimes many places where things are written in English and Spanish, where 20, 30, 40 years ago that certainly wasn't the case. The demographics in the U.S. have changed, and our children today are going to be traveling all around the world for their careers. The greater understanding they have of a second language will certainly give them the competitive edge. It's interesting in listening to both Principal Ferro and Principal Tranter talk about foreign language instruction in Whitman-Hanson, because this is a perfect example of what has happened to our funding over the years. When I came to Whitman-Hanson 20 years ago, both middle schools offered French, Spanish, and Latin, and all students were able to take a foreign language. But due to diminishing resources, lower state funding, lower local funding, we even had a year, 2007 or so, where we had no foreign language in the middle schools. And as George Ferro just mentioned, at one point we were sharing a teacher. So this is a building back of the program. And clearly, if our students are going to be future ready and globally competitive, they need to have a great facility with a second language.
Well, it seems almost imperative, as I dealt with National Grid this week, to have a telephone pole removed from a place. They said press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish. So it seems like relevant languages, especially in the 21st century world where we're doing global education more and more each day. Another tough subject, and I'm asking these questions because at the end of every show I say to people, please call me, please text me. If you have questions, we need them answered. Class size. People talk about class size, and I hear it from all over the, globally and in this town. And they say, well, when I went to school, there was 35 kids in a class, and look at me, I'm successful. How is education different today than it was 30 years ago? Teaching, learning, how has it changed? Ruth, I'll put you on the spot.
Sure. Well, I can give you some examples. One of the things I want to call your attention to is that we've put out the Community Guide to Understanding the Whitman-Hanson Budget. And this is available on our website. We also have it available in our schools if people are interested. But there is a section in here that actually addresses exactly what you're talking about. And we actually call it student-to-teacher ratio. And it'd be kind of hard to see this chart on the screen. However, Whitman-Hanson has one of the worst student-to-teacher ratios in the entire Commonwealth. We're actually this red line that you see right here. The state average is the black one. Classrooms today, Whitman-Hanson, vary from very large classrooms. We have a 5th grade class at Indian Head School with 30. And we have some very small classes that have some of our students with the most challenging special needs. In today's schools, everyone goes to school. When I was in school, it was before special education law. There was actually a child in my neighborhood who never went to school. That's not the case in 2015, 2016. Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, the Commonwealth, we're all responsible for educating every child, and that's great diversity. So we do have some large class sizes and we have some very small ones, which gives us a student-teacher ratio of about 16.9 to 1. Which sounds great, but when I meet with a group of teachers in any of our elementary schools and I ask them how many of them have 16.9 students in their classroom, no hands go up. It's a big issue. The challenges today are much greater than they were before.
Okay. George.
Yeah, I think I can add a little bit to that. At the Whitman Middle School, class size ranges in the academics from 24 to 28, 29. When you talk about out of related arts, though, and that's your Spanish, that's your art, that's your wellness, that's your fitness, that's your music, we're up in the 30s already. And part of this student success budget would allow us to change our schedule a little bit and then offer more related arts, thus reducing the class size. And if you think about it, the world is like a television remote. Television remotes have changed, but the speed in which they react and the speed in which we live in this society now are much different than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So if a student has in his hand, or if a student thinks like a television remote, like we all do, you're not looking for commercials. You're always looking for something to grab your attention. You're looking to learn. You're looking to collaborate. And the teacher is no longer the one who imparts knowledge. There's things like the internet and Google for that. But the teacher is the one that harnesses the knowledge, that harnesses the creativity, and that now has to spark the interest in how do we best learn, how do we best communicate, and then how do we become successful with that knowledge in working with peers, not only in our community or our classroom, but larger in the school and then the larger society and world that's out there right now. So it's imperative that the class size is such that there's meaningful interaction with teacher and students, but that there's also a time for meaningful interaction student to student. And when you're getting into the high 20s and 30s, that's a serious challenge.
Bill, I'm going to change it up a little bit. Another question I had from a very spirited person was, why do we have social workers? What do schools and social workers have to do with each other? I mean, a lot of people don't believe that social workers should be in a school district or that the towns should be adding it, because as we get on in the show, when we talk about the 32 positions that the student success budget shows, 2 of them are social workers. It's burning up the internet. Why do we need social workers?
Well, one of the things that we found, and it's kind of across the board in education in general, is that in the last 10 years and even the last 5 years, we see more and more students who have mental health issues. We are constantly dealing with kids who are cutting, who have threatened suicide, who have social anxieties, and that's kids across all socioeconomic lines, town to town. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether what the family structure is like. Those things are happening everywhere. And it becomes the burden, and I'm not necessarily saying it's a burden, but it becomes the responsibility of the school system and the schools to kind of fill in the gaps that are falling in place, as the traditional family of mom and dad being home is becoming less common. Students have less support at home. So where do they get the support? They get it from us because they're with us 6 hours a day. We're able to help parents, give them advice, give them places to go. Where can they get help? How can we help them help their student? And, you know, as I said, we're seeing many, many more incidents of mental health issues that on a daily, weekly basis, you couldn't get in to see my adjustment counselor or my guidance counselor because they're dealing with some student who has some issue. This would allow us to, you know, kind of expand our service, get it down into the elementary schools where they're having some of the same issues, and then they just keep coming up. And they don't have the support that we have in the middle school, and it's vital that that kind of support gets into the schools so that we can help the families.
So basically, I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit with that, of the fact of everyone from the teacher to the administrator to the secretary is dealing with these mental health issues from all of these students, whether it be dealing with the parental parts of it, calling the homes, or whatever you're doing, or teaching the whole student. We talk about whole student teaching, every child, every day. And this is part of it, correct? If you have a child that's having mental health issues, someone has to deal with it, and it appears that the state has kind of changed gears on how it used to be, because I know all of the 3 of you have been principals and educators for many years, and it's changed. George, can you just hit on how it's changed a little bit?
I think it's important when you bring up the whole child, because if a student does not have the ability to access the curriculum because of something that's either taking place in their home life, something that's either taking place in their school life, or something that's taking place within inside their body, then they're not going to be able to access any academics. So the child has to be in a safe zone, has to be feeling that he can attain before curriculum can even be introduced or at least be successful. But the changes also come in the era of state mandates that we have now, in the era of restricted budgets that we have now. And it's important that as society changes, as life changes, as the speed in which society and life changes, that the school becomes the place to offer those services. The concept of social work is beginning at the elementary school will then provide parents with some of that needed help, or a resource for where parents can receive greater help so that they can help at home, help in school, form that partnership so that things like attendance are better addressed, things like school anxiety, social anxiety, anxiety, generalized anxiety, can be helped so that when that child comes to school, they can then learn with their peers in the way that they're meant to so that they can be successful learners.
You led me right into my next question, so it was pretty easy to go this way. You talk about mental health, and you also talk about safety and security. Now, following what's gone on in the last 10 years around the United States, safety and security in school buildings seems to be of the utmost thing that we're looking at different times, how to keep a student so they feel safe and they are safe. And one of the positions is in safety and security. Ruth?
This has been, of course, a concern of ours for a long, long time. And clearly when issues such as Sandy Hook take place, Columbine, a number of years ago, this is something school districts need to take very, very seriously. And I also think it ties in a lot with this whole issue of mental health and stress and the concerns that we see in society today. So as a result of that, it's very important that we can ensure our parents and our communities that our schools are safe. And this requires not only making sure we have card access, that we have IDs for everyone, that we have cameras, but also that staff are well trained in terms of what to do should there be a crisis and know what happens. We've been also looking, and I know George can speak to this as well, is just what are our entranceways like? What is the visibility like when someone's coming into our school? And at our high school this year, we actually reworked the entrance to make it more safe and secure, so we know who's in the building, and those people are all vetted before they go into the high school. We have not had a person available to do any kind of nighttime security as a result of budget cuts that happened at least 10 years ago. And as a result of that, we get concerned about the 7 properties at night, to make sure that the doors are locked, that they're not being propped open, that all the alarms are working. That's in the budget. The other thing that's in the budget that I think is important are adding additional duty aids at our elementary playgrounds at Duval and Conley, because student safety is so important even when children are outside, to make sure they're being watched carefully, and also to be assured that there aren't people who shouldn't be on the playground as well. We're also working with Assistant Superintendent Pat Dillon to look at a response system that's called Be Safe, where we'd work very closely with our first responders, not only in Whitman and Hanson, but also in surrounding communities, that should an incident take place, there's good, quick, early communication. So there are many things available there that we're looking at, but just as students can't learn well if they're emotionally not sound or if their emotional needs aren't met, they can't go to school and learn very well if they're not in safe and secure learning environments. So that's clearly a part of the student success budget. Once again, this budget comes back to looking at the whole child.
George?
And I think it's important what's going to take place, I think, at our schools, because Bill has found some things, I've found some things. But I think we need to remember that these students are in our buildings, but they're still our students even after the school day ends. And I say that because for years I've coached sports in this town. I live in this town. I've been at the schools on off school time hours. And one of the things we found at the middle school, and as every person who watches this can attest to, is that there's town basketball practice, for example, every day at the Whitman Middle School from approximately December to late March. And as a result of that, you get to the gym going through my lobby. And that is always not the safest route, because it does go about 135 yards till you get to the gymnasium. So one of the things we're looking at, hopefully in this budget, is to try to rework how students get to their town practices. We now try to go around the school. We need additional lighting. We need to put a little parking loop so they could do that, so they'd have access to the gym itself, and that we could better contain and better keep it safe for our students and the coaches so that they can enjoy the school after hours, because they're still students, they're still parents, they're still taxpayers, and they're still people of Whitman. And I know Bill has found some interesting pieces of security at his building.
One of the things that we found is over the summer, we had upgraded our security cameras and put in new cameras in different parts of the building on the outside. New system so that we can view all of the cameras. We can see them all at one time as to what's going on. And we found that there were a couple of blind spots. As we planned it out, it made sense where we put them. Now we found that there's some blind spots where kids can go and get into trouble either during the course of the day or at night, as George was saying, when they come in for community activities, whether it's cheerleading, basketball, or what have you, that if anybody asks any questions, we just can't see that area. So, an addition of 2 or 3 cameras would make a world of difference in terms of overall security and being able to see pretty much all areas of the school.
Well, that not only counts for the students, but that also counts for the community members that use all of the buildings in Whitman Hanson. It's recording. It's keeping safe. It's part of what we do. Another big question, and this is really a large question, and I had a lot of people on both sides of this question. I was shocked that as many were on both sides. Why is a library in today's world so important? Some people say, do away with the library, give them all Chromebooks, do away with the library, give them all iPads. Why is a library so important to a 21st century education? And that's a question I had from a taxpayer, and he was adamant. And I said, well, I'm going to ask that question. Who wants to go? Bill?
Bill,
Go ahead.
why not?
Well, right now, we don't have a full-time librarian at Hanson Middle. We share George's librarian 1 day a week, and then we have a substitute who's filled in 3 days a week. So our library is open for 4 days out of the 5. However, it doesn't allow students to have a full access of library and media. Things are changing rapidly with technology. You know, if you're thinking of a library in the old form of going in and checking out a book, yeah, maybe you don't need the librarian as much as we're saying you do. However, because media, technology, access to information is changing so quickly, we need to have somebody who can help guide students and teachers through that so that we can be better able to use the technology both in the library and in the classroom. So teachers can do different projects. Students are able to do research in a different manner than, you know, the old card catalog and being able to go through and find books or encyclopedias. There's so much out there, but you also want somebody who's going to be able to kind of check the websites and make sure that the website is appropriate, that it's an accurate website. There's so much stuff out there. We don't want students going in places that are inappropriate or inaccurate. So we need to have somebody to oversee that, to guide students, and to help teachers.
So kind of what you're telling me, what I'm taking out of this is librarian isn't just the old standard librarian that everybody pictured, but a librarian is more of a specialist, not only to help students excel, but to help teachers in guiding them through different projects and helping them and giving them tools that they need to better educate the children. And George?
I firmly believe that the library should be the lifeblood in the center of every building. We're talking about literacy, we're talking about access to literacy, and then we're talking about how to use information, like Bill said, that's out there, but how to use it in a way that's appropriate, that's responsible, and that's also valuable for students. Everybody has access to information with the world we live in today. It's how do we take that information, use it in a way that stimulates original thought, creative thought, and then be able to collaborate with our peers and produce something original. Now, if you think about librarians, let me give you an example. Our librarian is a wonderful woman, Jeanette Conroy. I was very adamant that I did not want to give her up this year. That led to some colorful conversations. But we did, and we worked it out. But this is a person who, if I use the example of science, we have regular science curriculum, but she was able to find over 500 free science curriculum pieces attached to the standards that we have so that students can further access their knowledge on any given device, be that their own phone, an e-reader, be that an iPad, a Chromebook, or online. So that's a person who's invaluable to add to the curriculum we already have and then to allow our teaching staff to become better educators to then educate our students. So it's a very valuable and needed thing.
I think our kids are living, we all are, living in a world of information explosion. You can Google anything and you get 200,000 hits. But how do you know which of those 200,000 hits is research-based, has the true information you want, or maybe it's based on some false resources? So our library media specialists are much different than the ones who traditionally checked out books. We still believe print media is important, but clearly the advent of the internet, the multiple resources which grow logarithmically every single day, need to be triaged, and that is the role of the library media person. George gave you an excellent example of why this is so critically important, probably now more than ever before.
Ruth, this question's for you. These 32 positions that are being added should the student success budget be voted in the affirmative, why this year? Why not last year, or why not next year?
I believe that after many budgets and much cutting, it became very evident to our leadership team that it was important to put together a budget that showed citizens in both towns just what we've been cutting year after year after year. Typically what's happened is we've presented a budget to school committee that's been up by maybe 5% from the year before. We present that at the end of January, early February, and then we spend the entire winter and early spring cutting that budget. And the result of that has been just what we've talked about today. Meager foreign language programs, class size that's too big, safety and security that has not been able to move forward. The list goes on and on. And this year the feeling was, let's let people see just what it takes to begin to move Whitman-Hanson out of the bottom in per pupil expenditures and forward into an academic world that our students deserve. So that's why it was done this way this year. I think we just couldn't cut. Having George Ferro here is a perfect example. Both George and I were getting to the point we were dreading every winter and early spring, because all it was meeting upon meeting of what positions are we not going to refill because of a retirement, who are we going to lay off, how big is the class size going to be, and I think we're at a point in time where we're saying, let's let the taxpayers and the voters decide where we need to go.
Well, I think it's incumbent upon the district and the school committee to come forward, tell the community where it is that the districts are at. If they don't know it's broken, then obviously they can't make any decisions how to fix it. It appears that the library, as I've seen and I heard from the three of you, have passion for a library, and personally I'm a library kind of guy myself. I believe that books are the heart and soul of learning and teaching both. It's an invaluable resource. And it was a pretty quick half hour, so we're kind of wrapping up. So what would you say, we've only got a couple minutes, so Ruth or any one of the three of you can answer this. What would you say to the people to do for our student success budget? And you've got about a minute to wrap it up. Ruth?
I think we have given folks a great opportunity to invest in the future. Our children are our future. If we educate them at a per pupil that's 10th from the bottom, we may get what we pay for. This is an opportunity to add things back that have been cut and also to fund some new programs. Today's student is not the same student we had 10, 20, 50, even 15 years ago. I think it's a great opportunity for Whitman-Hanson to show that they invest in their children.
Well, thank you. Thank all the three of you. And talking directly to the people who may be viewing the show, we try to bring you the show as an educational forum to get your answers, your questions answered in a manner that everybody can understand and everybody can go through, because these questions are important. They do affect the community. They affect the community by how we're going to impact the taxes locally, how people are going to go through this. It's a very passionate thing, as you know, in both communities. I mean, it's hot. You can't, it's like years ago, the social media thing didn't happen quite the way it's happening now. It's on fire. There's no way. People say, well, don't go on social media. Well, there's no way to do it. It's how people communicate today. And if we can get the message out through Whitman-Hanson Cable Access Station, that's what we try to do. We want to get the message out to the viewers. And if you have any questions for me, my name is Bob Hayes. You can contact me at 617-538-0189. And thank you for viewing, and we'll see you next time.